So this month has been a response to a query I put out to some in our congregation about what are we feeling heavy about? Is there anything we're feeling heavy about in our heart? Anything that we're dealing with? And as I've shared with you, the overwhelming response had to do with the idea of finding peace and presence in the midst of chaos and in the midst of a changing world. And so that's what we've been exploring together this month. And today in particular, I want to talk about the idea of an unshakable heart. An unshakable heart. Say that with me. An unshakable heart. An unshakable heart. The idea of resilience, really, of resilience. As I was working on this talk, and as you know, I do these quite in advance, but then I always look at them throughout the week before I share my ideas with you. And I always look for additional pieces that may be of interest and support. And as I was putting some finishing touches on this just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I came across something that was quite remarkable to me. And I took the time to verify, was this story really true? And so I want to start by asking if we have anyone in the room who is a Michigander. Anyone from Michigan? Just a couple. Okay, well, you'll relate to this, Patrick, and perhaps in the back. And I know one of our remote virtual board members is from Michigan. A couple of them, actually. So anyway, this story has to do with a lighthouse on Lake Michigan in the area called St. Joseph. And in Lake Michigan, to begin with, it gets really, really, really cold. And in 2016, there was a polar vortex that was so strong that the winds were about 60 miles an hour, and the temperatures dropped to 20 degrees below zero. That's got to be really, really cold. And the ice and the snow was blasting so hard on this beautiful lighthouse at St. Joseph, Michigan, that the next morning when they took a look at this lighthouse, it was entirely encased in sheets of ice. I encourage you, Google, you don't have to do it right now, but Google St. Joseph, Michigan 2016, the lighthouse, and you will see an astounding picture of the fury of that polar vortex and what it did. It made that lighthouse look as if it was weighted down and carrying this tremendous burden. And as I saw that picture and read about the story, I thought, sometimes it seems that that's the way we might feel. Like we're carrying the weight of the world or our family situation on our shoulders, and we can feel weighted down by that. The fascinating thing about this lighthouse, though, was it was still being a lighthouse. The light was still shining. It was still doing its job. And the reason it was still doing its job was because of the way it was engineered. There is a hollow core to that lighthouse. And that hollow core made of cast iron keeps the temperature inside, retains the warmth of the light and the other mechanisms, machines inside to keep that light going. And it maintains the light, maintains that temperature so that lighthouse can do the very thing that it's designed to do. That light receives its power from a source that can't be touched by the storm. And when I saw that picture and I read about that, I thought, that's very much like cultivating an unshakable heart, the very core of us, to be able to cultivate and build this, I don't want to say hollow, but this spaciousness within us that is able to recognize the storms that are happening around us, but is also able to be unaffected by it, is able to still let the light shine, is able to still maintain its warmth. To me, our spiritual practice, our steady spiritual practice, is what allows us to have that unshakable core, that unshakable heart. Many people pull out their spiritual practice, their meditation practice, their prayer practice, when there's something going wrong in their life. Many people tend to resort to their spiritual practices in response to something that is going on in their life or in the world that they don't like. And while I'm all for whatever it takes for us to practice to use our spiritual tools and practices, what I know is it is far more powerful, and it helps us to build a truly unshakable, resilient heart when we practice all of the time, not just when all blank is happening. Does this make sense? It's how we build that resilience. Many of you know that I'm a fan of the late Eric Butterworth, who was a unity minister, had a remarkable work in New York City, wrote some really great classic New Thought unity books, including the book Discover the Power Within You, that was quite instrumental in Oprah Winfrey's introduction into unity. Eric wrote, "The world is not going to pieces, it's going through a process of being made new." Take that in for a moment. The world is not going to pieces, it's going through a process of being made new. It may take an extraordinary amount of our faith to hold on to that at times, and yet I believe that it is true. And I believe that it is true because there's one presence and one power in the universe. That presence and that power is God. It is the through line through everything. It is what allows everything to evolve into higher and more complex and more robust forms of expression and life. And in the process of evolving higher and higher, whether we're talking about an organism or the human consciousness, in the process of evolving and going higher and higher, what's left behind in that process can look like chaos. And I think that is in part what we are witnessing and have been witnessing now for some time, as old structures and forms and institutions and ways of doing things are not working anymore, and new ways are having to come forth. It's a time of remarkable transition that's not easy, but requires, I think, people of spiritual practice and people of faith to stay steady in the course and be like that lighthouse, that no matter if it's 20 below and the winds are 60 miles an hour, that we're able to maintain as best we can that warm, bright core. The world is not going to pieces. It's going through a process of being made new. So how do we build that unshakable heart? And what is that like? What do you think of when I use the phrase unshakable heart? What comes to your mind when I use the word resilience? One of the things that always comes to my mind with the idea of resilience is also the idea of bounceability. Bounceability, and I've used this many times before. It must be because it brings back childhood memories. Some of you are of the similar age to me, and you may remember those big blow-up toys that might have been about yay high. They were often in the shape of a clown. They were cheerful, and they had a base filled with sand. And so kids could punch them. I don't know that that was the best thing to encourage kids to do, but they could punch them, and what would always happen to that blow-up toy? It would always right itself. It would always right itself because it had a base. It had a base. Our spiritual teachings provide us that base, but they only provide us that base of resiliency when we actually practice them with some consistency. When we don't just pull them out in response to a situation, but we practice them consistently so we maintain that inner core of stability, that inner core of unshakable faith. You know, there's physical resilience and there's spiritual resilience, and they're not exactly the same thing. While physical resilience is about the body's ability to withstand impact, spiritual resilience is about the soul's ability to transcend it. Let me repeat that. While physical resilience is about the body's ability to withstand impact, spiritual resilience is about the soul's ability to transcend it, to kind of cancel it out, if you will. How many of you have ever used noise-canceling headphones? Pretty popular, right? It's a little bit of a misnomer, though, because those headphones don't actually eliminate the noise. Those headphones just initiate or produce a sound that balances out or cancels out the other noise that's coming in, so what the receiver hears is a greater degree of silence. Our spiritual practice is a little bit like that. It allows us to cancel out, at least in terms of its impact on us, the noise of the world. The noise of the world. Physical resilience can leave us exhausted after a while, but spiritual resilience is something different because it is a result of us plugging in to the divine. Think about it this way. The source of physical resilience is the strength and the health of our body. The source of spiritual resilience is our connection to God by whatever name we're comfortable using. Our connection to God. The focus of physical resilience is recovery from an impact. The focus of spiritual resilience is maintaining our peace, our inner calmness in spite of the external. And the action of physical resilience is endurance or grit. Think about it. When you're physically enduring something, right, or when you're physically dealing with something and trying to be resilient with it, there's a certain amount of grit involved. Whereas the action, if you will, of spiritual resilience is surrender and grace. And when I use the word surrender, I had a hard time with the word surrender initially in my spiritual studies and understanding, because I thought surrender meant giving up. And that's not what we mean in a spiritual context. When we're talking about surrender in a spiritual context, we're talking about giving into spirit, giving into the divine flow. We're talking about not being resistant to it. Does that make sense? Okay, all righty. There's so many illustrations and metaphors that we can use to this internal core of unshakability, this internal core of a resilient heart. Think about a hurricane. The fierceness and size of a hurricane. They can be enormous, and we all know how very destructive they can be, creating chaos and destruction wherever they go. And yet we know that there is a center in that hurricane where it is quiet and peaceful. And sometimes in that center, I guess they have ways of putting cameras in there and seeing this, which to me in itself is amazing. You can look up and see a blue sky. Sometimes they've even captured birds within the center of that hurricane. Birds knowing that it's safe there, but don't go out to that other part, right? It's that inner core, that spirit for us. The analogy is that inner core that we maintain with our spiritual practice. Emotional, spiritual agility is what we're talking about. And sometimes this idea of spiritual resilience is misunderstood for not feeling or for being stoic, no feelings at all. And that's not what it is at all. It's not what it is at all. The truth is, most people get stuck and hooked by their emotions, right? Get stuck and hooked by their emotions. The ability to label an emotion, the ability to label what it is we are feeling, the ability to label what is in that realm of the chaos, of the destruction, of the damage, of the confusion, of the conflict, the ability to name it without internalizing it. There's a huge difference in being able to label and say, I am experiencing anger, I am experiencing sadness, I am experiencing fear, I am experiencing worry. There's a big difference between being able to label that, identify it, and saying or becoming the emotion. Does that make sense? And that's a really important part of our spiritual practice. To put it more simply, it's a difference between being Velcro or Teflon. Think about that for a moment. How many of you have Teflon cookware? Or not now, maybe they don't even call it Teflon anymore, but non-stick, right? If it's working properly and you've taken care of it, you can put, fry eggs in there and they come out just fine and don't leave anything behind. Velcro, my ankle brace, is nothing but about 8 straps of Velcro. That stuff is so stiff and so hard. They can use it to keep my ankle straight without having to cast it. That's pretty amazing to me. We want to be more like Teflon, certainly with some emotions, than Velcro. We don't want to be the feeling. We can have the feeling, we can name the feeling. That's healthy and that's right and that's good. And it's part of how we can transcend it. And the ability to transcend it is what being spiritually resilient is all about. It's what it looks like when we have an unshakable heart. It's not that we're not feeling, we are feeling. But we don't become that feeling. We don't put our identity in that feeling. And therefore, we're not pulled down. We're able to be much more like that bouncing toy I've shared about. And so I want to just walk you through very, very, somewhat quickly, a process that I think really helps to build the core of unshakability in terms of the heart. And it comes from the work of the Institute of HeartMath. I encourage you to become more acquainted with it because there's all sorts of trainings and books and helpful information out on the web about it. The Institute of HeartMath has studied now for decades what happens to people when they are feeling stress and what that does to the rhythm of the heart, making the rhythm and the beating of the heart more jagged or incoherent or incongruent, I should say. And so when there are techniques that we can practice that help to put the heart in a more stable state, in a smoother, rhythmic state. You might say, what difference does that make? It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference to us physically, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. There is no doubt that we make better choices and decisions in life from a calm emotional core than when we are rattled or angry or sad or afraid or upset. Someone was sharing with me last Sunday, and I hope I remember it correctly, that there is a practice or a teaching in 12 steps called HALT. To not make a decision or take actions when you're, let's see if I remember, remember, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? Did I get that right? Some of you, okay, I got it right. Very wise practice, right? So as we learn to nurture the heart, as we learn to manage our feelings, as we learn to deal with the worry or fear or anger or sadness we might feel because of what's happening in the world or what's happening just closer to home in our own families and in our own lives. As we learn to manage that stress, we then are able to experience greater health, of course, but we are also able to access clearer thinking. Would you not agree that times like these really require the best thinking that we can get in touch with? You're very quiet today. I think it does. I think it does, and I think it requires that of each and every one of us. So in HeartMath, in the practice of the HeartMath technique, there are 4 kind of core elements to it, starting with the very first one, which is the simplest part of HeartMath, and it is simply to focus one's attention on one's breath. To simply focus one's attention on one's breath. When we are angry, when we are sad, when we are worried, when we are upset, we name it. We go, oh, there's that feeling, I feel it. And then we shift our attention for just a moment. And if we're paying attention and we shift our attention to our breath, we're going to find that our breath is not slow and smooth and easy. It's probably short and fast and shallow. And it pulls us out of the here and now and tends to put us in a place of worry about the future or regret about the past. And so we shift for just a moment and focus our attention on our breath. Do it with me right now. Just pay attention to your breath. And notice your body as you do. In a way, it's like a little bit of a prayer. Just to notice your breath and just to notice your body. Before we can change our perspective about things, we have to deal with our physiology. Yes, we are spiritual beings, but guess what? We're doing that spiritual stuff through a human body, a physical body, that's prone to all sorts of things. Stress certainly being one of them. And just making it a real practice when you catch yourself in a state of stress, worry, fear, anger, sadness, to not blame yourself for being there, but to simply put your attention for a few moments on the breath. It will help. It won't solve everything, but it will help. The second piece of HeartMath is what they call the quick coherence or the emotional reset. And so it's built upon the breath, but instead of just waiting, it is the cultivating of a particular uplifting, healing, or positive feeling. And in the research that HeartMath has done, they have researched the efficacy of any number of different feelings that people can practice holding to see which ones have the greatest success of helping a person's heart reach a state of physical coherence. And the 4 that they've studied and have found to be the most effective are joy, love, genuine concern, not worry, but concern, like compassion, but they use the words genuine concern, and appreciation or gratitude. And of those 4, do you know which one they have found to be the absolute most effective? Gratitude. Gratitude. And so, when we feel ourselves in that place, we're listening to the news, we're hearing one more frightening, worrisome bit of information on the news, or we're receiving some information from the doctor or from our financial person. We name it, we know what we're feeling, we put our attention on our breath, and we choose to embody, to practice holding that feeling. Do it right now. Attention on your breath. Don't even need your eyes closed for these. Nobody even needs to know you're doing it. And if I were to say to you, practice for just 3 breaths, feeling gratitude. I'm confident you can do it and are doing it. Why does that matter? It matters because when we are stressed over whatever it is, we don't make our best choices. And not only do we not make our best choices, we don't create, I'm going to use very simplistic words, we clog up our channel to the divine so that it becomes more difficult for us to really sense Spirit's presence, God's presence, the divine mind, whatever you want to call it, when we're stressed, when we're worried, when we're upset. And so in that HeartMath practice, it's focus on the breath and then choose to practice feeling. Don't wait for peace to come to you. Choose to practice it. Choose to feel it. And then the third is what they call their freeze frame technique. And that is when you're in that situation that's got you feeling worried, upset, sad, angry, that you freeze frame it, just like you can push the pause button on your TV, right? And you can freeze frame what's right there. And so the technique is you freeze frame on that thing that has got you feeling the way you don't want to be feeling, while practicing the breath, while holding an uplifting feeling, and by holding a thought or a question like this: what would be a more effective attitude or action right now? And it's probably not giving that person a less than supportive hand gesture. It's probably not sending that angry email even though you feel justified doing it. It's probably not yelling at that person or throwing something at the television, right? What would be a more effective attitude or action here? And then attempting to live out from that. And then the very last, because heart-focused breathing, the quick coherence practice where you're practicing the feeling, so it's breath, practicing the feeling, freeze frame. The last they call heart lock-in, and they do a much better job, obviously, teaching all this. I'm just trying to introduce you to the general concepts and practices. The heart lock-in is about practicing this consistently for 10, 15 minutes a day. Why? Because it helps you to cultivate that inner core. Go back to the example I gave you of the St. Joseph, the lighthouse at St. Joseph. It helps you be able to cultivate and then maintain that inner core. Last week I shared with you, and I'll be wrapping up here, I shared with you that on Friday we had a house leak. And we're still, if you've ever dealt with house leaks, and a significant one, there's a lot of aftermath. So my house has been extremely noisy since last Friday with dehumidifiers and fans everywhere. And then just a few days ago, from my mother's bedroom, our entire hallway, part of our living room, and part of like a small little sitting area we have, 2 feet up from the floor, they cut all the drywall, and so it's noisy, it's messy, and those of you who've been with me for any length of time know that I like order. I like beauty. and I like quiet. If you put me in a cave all by myself, I would organize the rocks in the cave, and I would have the cave as pretty as I could make the cave. Not for anybody else, but for me. I share that because this is not what my house looks like right now. And everything that was in that one bedroom is everywhere else in the house. So there's like almost no place I can go where there's not this chaos. And so John and I were processing some of this the other day. And he paid me a compliment that really touched me. He said, Wendy, I don't think I've ever met anybody more resilient than you. He didn't know, he never knows what I'm talking about. He said, I don't think I've ever met anybody any more resilient than you. And I thought about that, and I owned that. But I owned it because I know it is, I'm not different than anybody else, but I've practiced this stuff for a very, very, very long time. And not just in response to situations that arise, but to do it steadily and consistently. And so whatever it is that you may be dealing with personally, whatever you may be dealing with at work, or however heavy your heart may be about what's happening in the world, I keep reaching out to Nicole. She has family in Tehran. Breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. Whatever it is that you are dealing with personally, what I do know is there is a way to cultivate a resilience and an unshakableness within yourself that is going to make it easier for you to meet whatever it is that is going on. Does that make sense? And I think you would agree that what I've shared, there's nothing hard about it. You can turn your attention to your breath. You can choose to practice holding a feeling. You can choose to pause. You can choose to ask a better question. What would be a better attitude right now? What would be more effective right now? It's going to take practice. At least it still does for me. But it does work. It does work. So I hope that there's some of what I've shared with you this morning that buoys you up and helps you to feel that becoming more resilient and cultivating more unshakability is within your reach. It's well worth trying. Namaste.